Porsche Cayenne on my left was matte dark, the Tesla Model S on my right a gleaming pearl white. Their doors clicked shut with a sound that just screamed entitled. My 2012 Honda Accord's door? It whispered closed, kind of like me. 10 years. That's how long it had been since I'd last stepped inside the Bennett family brownstone in Beacon Hill. 10 years since I'd just walked out. No shouting match, no dramatic storming off. Just me, a sketchbook, a refurbished laptop, and the wristwatch I still had on. Tonight, I was 35. I wore a navy wrap dress I'd found crammed in the back of my Boston apartment closet. No fancy label, no frills, just good lines and a quiet confidence I'd earned. I came alone. No date, no entourage. Just me. Just Lauren. The heavy oak front door was already ajar, like an invitation or a dare. Inside, the polished marble floor gleamed, cold and calculated as ever. I stepped in. The massive chandelier above the dining room table still dripped its golden light over 16 pristine place settings. Crystal glasses, heavy silver cutlery. The air hummed with the faint, rich scent of veal and some kind of reduction sauce. Nothing had changed. Except, well, me. At the head of the table, Sylvia Bennett, my mother, sat. Flawless, as always. Unbending, as always. Her head turned, slow and deliberate, when she spotted me. Then came the smile, the one she used instead of actual barbed wire. "Well," she said, her voice carrying just enough for the hovering servers to catch every word. "The prodigal disappointment returns." A ripple of soft chuckles went around the table. From Malcolm, my older brother, the corporate lawyer with a Harvard tie and a heart you could probably see through. From Cousin Andrew, Wall Street's loudest mouthpiece. From Lydia, Malcolm's wife, who once told me my only shot at amounting to anything was to marry into it. I stood there, hands steady at my sides. Then, the follow-up, clear and cold. "You're an embarrassment to this family," my mother declared. No one even flinched. A few actually nodded. Others suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. I didn't say a word, didn't even blink. I walked to the empty chair at the far end of the table, the one nobody ever bothered with, next to a platter that would never be passed my way. Across the expanse of polished wood, Malcolm raised his glass. "To high standards?" he smirked. I didn't raise mine. Maybe they noticed. Maybe that was the whole point. I glanced at my wristwatch. Still ticking. Still mine. And for the first time in years, visiting this house, I actually wondered what time it was, because I had places to be. There's a photo somewhere in this brownstone, probably in a glitzy crystal frame on an upstairs table. Malcolm's Yale graduation, the whole family, posed like an ad for generational wealth. Pastel colors, pearls, champagne flutes, all beaming about legacy. I'm in it too, barely. Off to the side, practically cropped out by distance and their sheer intention. I was 22, fresh out of NYU with a computer science degree, not Ivy League, not Bennett material. During the celebratory brunch back then, I'd told them about a job offer. Junior data analyst for a cybersecurity subcontractor near DC. Sylvia had blinked once. "That's niche," she'd said. Leonard, my father, hadn't even bothered to look up from his phone. "You know, Lauren," he'd mumbled, "we could still pull some strings. Georgetown Law has summer openings. I remember carefully folding my napkin, smiling that polite, empty smile I'd perfected. I didn't argue. The next morning I was gone. No dramatic goodbyes, no slammed doors. Just silence. 2 suitcases, a Greyhound ticket from South Station to a tiny Brooklyn sublet, and a head full of code no one in this house believed in. That was the real start of HereTech. It began in that sublet, the one with peeling paint, a radiator that Sounded like a dying whale, and coffee that always tasted a bit off. I coded on a secondhand MacBook until my eyes burned. I pitched to blank faces on Zoom calls. I got told no exactly 57 times before one investor, an ex-NSA cryptographer named June, saw something in me my own family had deliberately ignored. She didn't just offer encouragement. She handed me a check for $200,000 and a simple, leather-banded analog wristwatch. "You'll need something to measure time," she'd said. "Not just the hours, but the milestones." I've worn it every single day since. When HairTech landed our first Department of Defense contract, I mailed my parents a letter. Not asking for approval, just stating the facts. 3 weeks later, Sylvia replied. Typed, signed. "Please don't attach the Bennett name to something uncertain." No congrats. No call. I framed that letter. Every setback, every closed door, every time HairTech clawed its way up, 10 million, then 100 million, then 2 billion, I'd reread that letter. Not to find my way back to them, but to remember how far I'd pushed myself away from their definition of success. I didn't come back to Boston. Not for birthdays. Not when Lydia had twins. Not even when my father had his stroke, and Malcolm droned on about family unity. They never actually asked me to return, and I sure didn't offer. Until tonight. Now, sitting at their gleaming table, surrounded by monogrammed napkins, carefully measured smirks and polished silver, I looked at the faces that had once confidently predicted my failure. And I remembered why I was really here. It wasn't for them. It was for something quieter, heavier, something that felt a lot like closure. Dinner was veal. It was always veal. Veal over wild mushroom risotto, served on bone-white china rimmed in gold, the same set Sylvia had triumphantly shipped from Milan the year I turned 17. I remembered because that was also the year she completely forgot my birthday. I hadn't touched veal in a decade. I picked at my food in silence. Malcolm, predictably, was holding court, recounting some dramatic tale about saving an arbitration deal at the last second. He waved his fork like a tiny gavel, every word dripping with self-importance. Lydia, his perfect echo, chimed in about being the youngest partner in her firm's history, a fact she made sure to repeat. Her diamond earrings flashed, almost as bright as her manufactured pride. Across from me, Cousin Andrew was practically yelling about emerging markets, his wine glass conducting an invisible, chaotic orchestra. He wasn't really talking to anyone, just desperate to be heard by everyone. Sylvia, poised at the head of the table, was the silent conductor of this symphony of self-praise, nodding, smiling, subtly directing the tempo. When her eyes finally landed on me, her smile thinned just a fraction. "Still, working in technology, dear? Not tech, not cybersecurity. Not even your company. Just working." I nodded. Still building systems. That somehow was the cue for others to lean in. Andrew, abandoning his invisible orchestra, asked, "Apps? Crypto? Websites?" I could have told them HearTech handled 15% of the federal government's secure cloud architecture. I didn't. Before I could formulate a polite, vague answer, Malcolm jumped in. "She used to stay up all night with that ancient Dell desktop, remember?" Sylvia added smoothly. "We thought it was just a phase." Lydia, meticulously dissecting her veal, asked, without looking up, "So, do you have a team, or are you still doing it all yourself?" HearTech had over 300 employees now. We'd just opened our Tokyo branch. We were in the middle of prepping a major NATO infrastructure bid. I kept it simple. "No, I have help." Malcolm smirked. "Eventually, everyone needs a real job." The laughter that followed was soft, elegant, and sharp as a razor. Sylvia intervened, her voice dipped in that diplomatic sugar she used so well. "Lauren has always carved her own path." That word again. Other. Outlier. Not one of us. Malcolm raised his glass with a theatrical warmth. To the rebels in the family, may they find their way back before it's too late. I didn't raise mine. If you've ever sat quietly at a table where every single person was underestimating you, you know this feeling. Stick with me. What happens next? It changes everything. You might want to tap subscribe because you won't want to miss the moment they finally see who I really am. Instead of reacting, I just glanced down at my wristwatch. Still ticking. Still mine. Andrew, ever the opportunist, leaned in again, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur. My firm's actually expanding into startup investments, he said, trying to sound casual. If you've got a little pitch deck, I could take a look. Always happy to give your little project a shot. He winked. Little project. I met his eyes. It's not little. He laughed, a dismissive puff of air. Oh yeah? Then how come we've never heard of it? I let the silence hang for a beat. Maybe you just weren't listening. The table froze. Lydia let out a sharp, startled little laugh, quickly stifled. Sylvia chuckled, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wine glass. We're just teasing, darling. It's all in good fun. But it wasn't. It never had been. They just hadn't been paying attention to who wasn't laughing. Dessert arrived. Fig tartlets with a lavender honey drizzle and a perfect swirl of creme fraiche. I didn't touch mine. Malcolm launched into a story about depositions in Miami, his voice starting to echo in the suddenly too quiet room, when a soft knock came from the front of the house. Moments later, Jillian appeared. My assistant. Always composed. Always in. Black when I asked her to be. Tonight she wore black. She walked past the startled faces, stopping quietly beside me. I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Bennett, she murmured, her voice perfectly modulated. But the jet is ready. The pilot needs final confirmation for the Tokyo flight plan. It has to be filed within the hour. Lydia dropped her fork. It hit the china, with a distinct hollow clink. I didn't flinch. I calmly folded my napkin. Thank you, Jillian. Tell Captain Reyes we'll proceed as planned. We'll make the stopover in San Francisco for the board vote. I'll join the call en route. Jillian nodded once and vanished as smoothly as she'd arrived. Silence. Not awkward silence. Not confused silence. Dead silence. The kind that settles like ash when something you thought was solid just collapses. Andrew blinked rapidly. Malcolm's jaw was visibly clenched. Sylvia sat even straighter, as if perfect posture alone could hold reality together. Jet? Malcolm finally managed to choke out. I dabbed the corner of my mouth with the napkin. Gulfstream, I said. We use it for intercontinental meetings. HereTech finalized the Tokyo partnership last quarter. HereTech, Andrew repeated, the name, sounding foreign and strange on his tongue. My company, I said simply. Sylvia's eyes narrowed. You have a jet? I have a company, I corrected gently. The jet is just efficient. Malcolm tried to laugh, but it came out as a strangled cough. So what? You're saying you're running some kind of real operation now? I reached into my handbag, pulled out my phone, and opened the Bloomberg app. I slid it across the polished table. The headline was clear. HereTech secures $900 million DHS contract for national cyber defense infrastructure. Below it, a photo of me, taken during our press conference on Capitol Hill. Andrew leaned forward, squinting. That's you? I nodded. No fanfare. No need for elaboration. Sylvia's hand hovered near the phone but didn't touch it. I saw a tiny tremor in her fingers. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, her voice suddenly fragile, unfamiliar. Would it have mattered? I asked, my own voice calm. The room stilled. The fig tartlets sat untouched. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. I glanced down at my watch. Still ticking. Still mine. Malcolm was the first to find his voice, or at least a sputtering imitation of it. It had that sharp, legalistic edge he used when he was rattled in court. He jabbed a finger toward my phone. This could be exaggerated. I tilted, my head slightly. You think Bloomberg routinely inflates the value of federal contracts? He looked away. Andrew was still staring at the screen, his lips moving silently, as if the headlines might rearrange themselves into something less staggering if he read them enough times. I watched as the numbers, the sheer scale of it, began to land. 5.8 billion, he murmured, like the words themselves caused him physical pain. No, I said quietly. We crossed 6 last month. Lydia reached for her wine, her fingers trembling so much she missed the stem on the first try. Sylvia hadn't moved. She just sat there, straighter than ever, her gaze fixed on the empty space on the table where my phone had been. Then, so softly, it almost didn't carry across the silence, she asked, "You built this alone?" "Not alone," I said. "Just not with any of you." Malcolm let out a dry, brittle laugh that sounded more like cracking glass. He started talking about family, about how I should have told them, how they could have helped, how we were blood. But I had a very clear memory of a conversation he'd had with our father when I was 25, the one where he'd called me a liability and strongly advised them to keep my name off the family Christmas newsletter. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked directly at him. "You said I was bad for the Bennett brand." He didn't deny it. He couldn't. Sylvia finally looked up, her eyes searching mine. "Families say things they don't always mean," she offered, a weak defense. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a folded letter, creased from years of being there, but carefully preserved. I slid it across the table. Her letter, 3 years old, typed, signed, cold. Don't put the Bennett name on anything that might not last. She didn't touch it. She just stared at it. Andrew, ever the opportunist, suddenly found new energy. "My firm's been looking to make serious inroads into tech partnerships," he declared, a little too loudly. "There could be incredible synergy here. Capital, networks. We could—" I let him talk until he finally paused for breath. "We're not raising capital," I said. Lydia jumped in next, her voice layered with a newfound syrupy sweetness. "If we'd only known, Lauren, maybe things would have been different. We could have supported you." I met her eyes. Not angry. Just tired. "Things were different," I said. "Just not for me in this house." Sylvia's hand inched towards the letter on the table. It stopped halfway, her fingers hovering, hesitating. Not because of what I'd become, I realized, but because actually reaching for that letter meant admitting, finally, that she had written it. My phone buzzed. Jillian. Right on time. I stood up, folded my napkin, and placed it beside my untouched tartlet. "I have a board vote in 6 hours. We're bidding on a NATO contract." I turned to leave. Sylvia's voice, thin and strained, caught me at the doorway. "Why tonight, Lauren? Why come back at all?" I paused, my back still to them. For a moment I considered her question. Then I turned, just enough to meet their stunned faces one last time. To see if anything had changed. A beat. It hasn't. I stepped into the hallway. Behind me, the dining room seemed to hold its breath, like a stage, after the curtain has fallen, but before the actors realize their scene is truly over. Then, predictably, the scramble began. Malcolm, always the quickest to pivot when advantage was on the line, called after me. "Lauren, wait. Maybe we should talk. Investments. If hairtech is expanding, there could be alignment, a strategic partnership." I turned just enough for him to see the flat line of my mouth. "You mean, now that you believe I exist?" Malcolm said nothing, his face flushing. Andrew hurried after him, almost tripping. Hey, listen, I've always believed in you. I mean, I knew you were smart. I just didn't realize. You didn't realize I stopped needing your approval years ago. I finished for him, my voice quiet but carrying. Lydia appeared, offering a small, carefully curated smile. If you're ever hiring, Lauren, I've actually been exploring some tech-adjacent fields. I looked at her. Years ago, she'd openly laughed when I tried to explain what I did for a living, telling people I worked with screens. Can you name one programming language? I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked away, and then, finally, Sylvia. She rose slowly from her chair, each movement calculated, more about asserting control than actual grace. You're angry, she said softly. I understand that. But don't let pride close doors that family can help keep open. That word again, I said, my voice devoid of heat. You had 10 years to open a door. You chose to paint it shut. Sylvia's voice dipped lower, taking on an almost maternal tone I hadn't heard since I was a child, and even then, it was rare. You're still a Bennett, Lauren. That means something. It means everything to you, I replied. And it means nothing in the world I built. She flinched, just a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. She reached a hand toward me, as if to touch my arm, to pull me back into her orbit. I stepped away, a small, decisive movement. Don't, I said, not unkindly. This isn't a fight. This is just a line. My phone buzzed again. Jillian, confirming the car. I reached for the light coat I'd left on a hall chair. No rush, no lingering drama. Just finality. At the front door, I turned one last time. Not to them, but to the house itself. The oppressive stillness, the years of silent judgment hanging in the air. You always thought I left because I failed, I said, my voice resonating, in the grand entryway. But I left because I finally understood. I didn't need to pass your tests anymore. I made my own. I opened the door. Outside, the car waited, engine purring quietly, driver standing patiently by the open rear door. The Boston air was cold, but for the first time in years, standing on these steps, it didn't seem to reach my bones. The wind caught the edge of my coat as I stepped forward. The car was already warm. The driver took my small handbag without a word. Jillian picked them well. Efficient, invisible, precise. Behind me, the heavy oak door creaked. It didn't close. They were still watching. Of course they were. Families like mine only seem to know how to chase what they've already irrevocably lost. I slid into the back seat. The leather was quiet, familiar in a way this house never was. As the car pulled away from the curb, away from the Bennett brownstone, I didn't look back. Not once. Not at the imposing columns. Not at the ornate stained glass windows. Not at the people who once measured my entire worth by the label on my dress, the car I didn't drive, or how softly I spoke at their dinner table. The silence inside the car wasn't tense and suffocating like theirs. The silence was mine. It was earned. I glanced at my wristwatch. The minute hand moved forward with a satisfying sweep. Face still ticking. Still mine. By morning, the messages began. A LinkedIn connection request from Lydia. A voicemail from Malcolm, his voice smooth and urgent. We should reconnect. Family synergy has real value, Lauren. An overly long email from Andrew. Subject line, Collaborative Innovation Opportunity. And from Sylvia, a handwritten note, delivered by courier. Thick, expensive paper, elegant, looping penmanship, gilt-edged in every single line. We should rebuild. You've made us proud. I didn't reply to any of them. I forwarded everything to Jillian with 2 words. Block list. That evening, a small, unassuming package arrived at the Bennett estate. No return address, no card. Inside, Sylvia found her old letter, the one about not attaching the Bennett name to uncertain things. Still creased, still cold. Beside it, a glossy photograph. It was of their dining room table, taken from just outside the window during dinner the previous night. My seat was conspicuously empty. Tucked under the photo was a single typed note. I was there. You just didn't see me. You don't have to explain it to me. Just leave 1 word in the comments they never said to you. And if you've ever felt unseen or had to build your own damn table, hit that subscribe button. Because this story, it's definitely not over.